Hello everyone and welcome to today's virtual presentation, Love Gene, Eugene Akers, His Life in Military Service and Letters. My name is Matt Thorenz and I'm the local history librarian and head librarian here at the Moffat Library of Washingtonville, located in Orange County, New York. Today's presentation is not just, important to a lot of people that I can imagine are interested in World War II history or might have had somebody who served in World War II. But also to me personally. I've spent about a decade researching our local history collections and presenting them and sharing them with our community near and far. But I cannot think of another collection of letters or materials that have affected me quite so much as Eugene's letters. What we're going to be looking at today is a snapshot of a snapshot. We're looking at 18 months of somebody's life that lived through one of the most important events in world history, which is World War II. We're going to be seeing somebody grow up from basically being a teenager, teenage feelings, teenage activities, to a man. And we're going to see that man serve his country from D-Day all the way to the end of his life at Okinawa in April of 1945. We're going to be going over some of the actions. We're going to be putting his life in the context of what's happening around him. Unfortunately, I will not be able to provide nearly as much detail in the time allotted to those crucial events. But suffice it to say, I will be providing resources for you at the end of this talk where you can learn more about these events and perhaps connect with other people who are also connected to these events in some way. So with that in mind, let me introduce you to Eugene Akers. First of all, we need to talk about Eugene's family. So Eugene Akers was born on March 27, 1925, to Dwight L. and Emily Rose Simmons Akers of Blooming Grove, New York. He was the youngest child of 3, and he was adept in school and a member of several clubs. He even got to attend the World's Fair in 1939 as part of the Young People's Club of Blooming Grove Church. Eugene had a fairly typical childhood for a boy his age, but that was about to change on December 7, 1941. On the right-hand side, we see Eugene's father, Dwight. Dwight was a historian. He was a local author. He moved out from the Midwest along with his wife, Emily, and settled on Round Hill Farm in Blooming Grove. Emily herself was very well adept. She actually was a member of our school board for many years, as well as our library board, and was really active in local politics and social affairs well to the end of her life. And it's for her that we thank for preserving Eugene's letters and providing them to our library for long-term preservation. The picture of them you could see on the left-hand side. Donald, who you'll meet in a minute, is standing. Eugene is sitting next to his mother in the middle. And this photo was probably taken around 1935, as they're both still rather young. So Blooming Grove at the time of World War II, we had, of course, we're a very small agrarian town. Probably no more than 900 to 1,000 people living here at that time. But again, global effects did affect us as well. Many young servicemen and women enlisted from our area to serve in various departments, such as the SPARS, the Navy, Army, Marines, and so forth. One of our first casualties of war was Joseph De Benedetto. He unfortunately died in a in an automobile accident stateside here, but he was given a full funeral, and of course his name made it to the Roll of Honor of those servicemen who were currently serving their country, that was displayed in front of our library property in 1942. We also had war rationing happening. Our library happens to have several ration cards, including this one belonging to Clara T. Hudson, whose brother served in World War I, and whose letters we also have here. She herself was a member of the local chapter of the American Red Cross for many years, leading up to World War II. And so you could see how rationing affected us. We also had Stewart Airfield, which is now Stewart International Airport and Stewart Air Base. And Stewart Field was actually used to train pilots for the Army Air Corps, because at that time the Air Force did not exist yet. And we also had West Point just to the south of us as well. So one of the first members of the Akers family was to enlist and serve was Donald, the young man that was standing in that previous photo. He enlisted in 1942, and he serves in the Army for the duration of the war. Because he was only 17 years old at the time, Eugene had to wait an additional year to enlist. But in August of 1943, he was inducted into the service after completing his junior year of in Washingtonville Central School. And several months after his 18th birthday, he was sent to the U.S. Naval Training Station Sampson, located in Romulus, New York. We actually have his naval enlistment notice from 1943, so this was the actual piece of paper that Eugene would have read before enlisting into the service in the Navy. And here we have Eugene's draft registration card. So again, like many young men that was eligible, he had to enlist in the draft. And we could see here, his birth date and his occupation. He was a student, again, so didn't even have a job yet. The Akers' other child, Leslie, stays home. He's a farmer, and we'll meet him later on. And this is just a really great document that is available through the National Archives. And on the back here, this is the back of Eugene's card, and we see here Catherine M. Horton, who was the clerk who would have signed it, and we could see some additional information about Eugene's height and his weight. So he's only 5'3", and he's 125 pounds. Brown hair, blue eyes. Brown eyes and brown hair, and light complexion. Following Eugene's enlistment, his first stop was U.S. Naval Training Station Sampson in Romulus, New York. U.S. Naval Training Station Sampson was one of several major recruit depots that were established by the U.S. Navy to train young men and women for naval service during World War II. Over the course of its lifetime, from 1942 until the end of the war in 1945, U.S. Naval Training Station Sampson would have been responsible for training over 411,000 people for service in World War II. These are two images from a book that Eugene sent home to his parents, basically detailing or giving kind of more of a sanitized view of what life was like for him and his comrades there. On the left-hand side is the regimental parade. This is where Eugene would have been drilled, with the lake in the background. They actually had a training vessel that they would have gone on. And on the right-hand side is the ship's service. And the ship's service is important to our story because this is where Eugene would have gotten his letters. And regardless of whether he was in Sampson or whether he was in Norfolk or other training or other naval bases, he always would go to the ship's service to get paper and pens and pencils to write with, to write his letters home. So if you go to the U.S. Naval Training Station Sampson today, not much is there, unfortunately. It was converted into an airfield after the war, and subsequently that was shut down later on. There is a museum there located in what is now the brig of the facility, but it's kind of a compared to what it was during World War II, obviously it's very stark. We're very lucky in that Eugene actually details in one of his first letters home where things were in relation to what he was doing. And this is an example of one of these diagrams that Eugene actually drew on the back of one of his letters home from Sampson. And you get a pretty good idea from his perspective of where things were. So for example, we have the ship's service, which I mentioned earlier, and that building, again, was where the soldiers would have gotten everything from stationery to boot black, equipment, you name it, they would have gotten it from the ship's service. Then we also have the mess hall, again, where Eugene would have had his meals before going out to the drill field. And then we also have the drill hall here, and the drill hall was where where they were trained in swimming and other athletic, physical phys ed kind of activities that would have benefited him for his military service. So one of Eugene's first letters is actually from U.S. Naval Training Station Sampson. We believe that this probably is from August of 1943, which is roughly around the time that he enlisted. And he writes, "Dear Mom, we just changed it to our navy blues. They look pretty sharp. It has been raining all day today, and we have had a fairly easy day of it. We had to square off our lockers this afternoon for Saturday captain's inspection. The double typhoid shot did not bother me much. I was just a little hot in the head, but I had no headache or upset stomach. Some of them in our company passed out and were taken to sickbay. I'm going to the movies tonight at 2000 or 8 o'clock p.m. Non-military time. The men that just come in are called barber bait, and those who have been here a week are skinheads. I am now a skinhead. My cut is probably worse than Donald's. I have about a ½ inch of hair in the back and top, and an inch in the very front. The sides are scraped clean. Not bad, eh?" And this is a photo of Eugene, probably taken around that time. So you get a good idea of the haircut that he would have gotten. Another aspect of Eugene's training that he documents in his letters from Sampson is the obstacle courses that he would have climbed over. This letter, written in early September of 1943, even shows the diagrams that he drew of the various nets, bridges, and ladders that he would have had to have climbed. And you could see a postcard illustration of one of these, courtesy of the Geneva Historical Society in Geneva, New York. This letter, he says, "Dear Mom, we had the commando course yesterday. This is what it consists of. We started off with an up and down hill climb on the run and in step. I apologize. On the run and steep. We then go through obstacles and crawl through a tunnel. We then climb up and down a 25-foot cargo net. The diagrams of the net and the way it is set up, he annotates here. We then have several 3-foot hurdles and then a stream to cross. A stream hand over hand on a ladder." And he shows the ladder there. "Then there's an 8-foot smooth wall to scale. The record for the course is 5 minutes. We did it in about 8 minutes. Not bad, eh? This afternoon had rifle drill. It is close order drill with rifles and the manual of arms. We drilled like hell, and Parley, our CPO, said we had real roster competition. We march in the parade Saturday in the roster competition. If we get the roster, if we get it's actually the rooster. I apologize, the rooster competition. If we get the rooster, it will mean we get a 10-hour leave in Geneva and an easy work week. In the morning, we fall out for course for colors at 0800 and stand at attention and salute the flag at 08:05 or 8:05 in the morning. It looks pretty good when we get all 20 or 30 companies lined up around the drill field. There are units from A to K, all of the same size. One has a baseball field, another an auditorium, another the football field. Pretty big, eh? Love, Gene. So you can imagine somebody who just graduated high school only a few months ago in this small town of about 800, or village of about 800 people, town of about 2,000, seeing all these other people lined up shoulder to shoulder in the same field. It's almost kind of like the equivalent of seeing the entire town marched out in front of him. Eugene's next stop after Sampson was the Naval College at Purdue University. He was transferred in October of 1943, and before he was transferred, he was given the option of either training to be a pharmacist's mate or an electrician's mate. He ultimately chose the latter, so the electrician's mate, following after his basic training. The Naval College at Purdue University was established early on in the war to basically as a way to kind of help kind of as a second phase of training for a lot of these young recruits, because again, basic training only teaches you so much. It teaches you how to use a weapon in combat, it teaches you, physical ed activities, basically the decorum of a soldier, and that's basically it. It's basic training. But in order to actually be competent in what you're doing, whether it's you're on a ship or you're in an airplane with other people, or you're serving in a in a tank or as part of an infantry company, you have to have some sort of specialty. So to kind of make you an active team member, and to make that boat go, or to make that boat sail, or to make that plane fly. And that's basically what Eugene is doing here at Purdue University. So his letters from Purdue are very interesting in and of themselves. One of Eugene's letters from Purdue University is kind of interesting because it actually references some things that happened to him here in Washingtonville, and kind of ties that into his current training schedule. In one letter from early October, he writes, "Dear Mom, I just got your letter, which was mailed to Sampson, so it was sent to the previous address. You asked me to give you more details on my course here. I did this in a letter previous to this one, but I can tell you more about it now. I have been going for 4 days. Most of the subjects are very interesting. The electrical lab and the mechanical shop are especially interesting. In the mechanical shop, we practice machine shop instructions and practice. We learn by actually using the tools and turning out metal products. We are now working on a cable hanger, which is used on board ship." So Eugene is actually learning things that are going to help him in the Navy on board a naval vessel. In electrical shop, we are working on magnetism and its use in producing a current. This is all physics, such as I had in high school. Letters on it will be more advanced. Lessons on it will be more advanced. Thank Mr. Taft. If it hadn't been for his teaching, I don't know where I would be. Arlen Taft was the principal of the Washingtonville Central School. He was a long-time teacher here in the district. Taft Elementary School, when it was constructed in the 60s, was named after him. And this is a photo of him actually in the principal's office in the Central School building. So this is probably as close as we could get to the view of Arlen Taft that Eugene would have saw as a student. Electrical theory is a good subject. It covers physics too. This subject runs in conjunction with the electrical lab. We have a period of swimming once or twice a week. They have a beautiful pool, and the water is swell. You asked if I had a chance to participate in college events. we are issued to participate. We are issued union cards Thursday at 21:50 or 9:50 p.m. Now I will continue Friday at 9:05. These union cards admit us to dances, college shows, and other events, ball games, etc. Only on liberties, of course. We have been swimming 3 periods this week. I had my first class in blueprint reading today. We learned to print letters and sketch and read electrical blueprints. It is going to be pretty good. Pop, or the chief gardener, is still tearing around with his little whistle. We get a big kick out of him. Some fellows really do get kicked. He may be 73 years old, but he's full of the old fight. So again, this is somebody who, Pop is somebody who is kind of training these people. He's probably somebody who either works at the college or worked at the college or was a veteran himself at some point, and he's training them in these physical ed activities. You also heard about the union cards, and that was something that was granted to Eugene to allow to kind of enjoy some of the activities at the college, but he wasn't really allowed to enjoy as much as other students would have. So this is the other half of that letter that I was reading earlier. So on the back, he says, here, I will probably go into Greater Lafayette to the U.S.O. or to see what there is in the line of girlies. Again, Eugene at this point, he's 17, 18, he's 18 years old, young man, and obviously, a lot of his letters kind of evoke that kind of immaturity about him. So again, bear with me as I may be reading some of these letters, and something like that might pop out. But he says, so he's going to the U.S.O. to see if there is anything in the line of girls. The V12s are on furlough. This leaves the field pretty clear. So who were the V12s, you might be asking? So the V12 program was started in July 5th, 1943. It initially had over 1,200 initial recruits. Most if not all of them were men. 4 to 6 terms, 16 weeks per term. Officer candidates were required to complete the V7 USNR midshipman school, 8 months, which included boot camp. So the V12 program was basically a way to kind of produce officers for the Navy that were needed to crew these ships and to lead these men like Eugene. And so these officers were recruited from people who, students that were currently going to school at universities like Purdue. And so you think of it kind of like an NJROTC or an ROTC program. So the program itself was actually pretty rigorous. As I just said, you're not just doing boot camp. You're also doing kind of advanced, management leadership classes. You're also going to be doing your specialized training. If you completed the program, you were commissioned as an ensign, and candidates were allowed to attend. They were still allowed to attend courses taught by civilian instructors and continue to participate in school activities. So the difference here really between Eugene and his fellow naval recruits and the V12s is that they're being trained in the Navy by whoever the Navy is assigning them. They also are allowed to participate in programs that are offered by the college, but only on liberty. The V12s, they're college students. They're already paying tuition, so they have those privileges already. On top of that, these guys are officers, or they're going to be officers. So that means a little bit more prestigious than somebody like Eugene, who's going to be going in as kind of somebody below a midshipman. So there's a little bit of animosity, and you'll see that in some of Eugene's letters. The V12 program wasn't just for men. This is a photo from Purdue's archives that shows members of the Curtis Wright cadets, and there's a group of women who are actually, learning how to produce aircraft engines. So again, not just for men, not just officers, but eventually it was expanded to women as well. As I alluded to on the previous slide, there's animosity between the V-12s and the reservists. In one of Eugene's letters, he writes, the V-12s are the most hated men up here. They get all the advantages. They get all the advantages. One reason is that they have no boot training, which again was a lie, but that's something that Eugene probably heard from one of his shipmates. They are commonly called teatless waves. So if you think about how a wave looks when you look at the beach and you see how it rolls and it looks like it kind of has like a little bit of a tip to it, that's what he's referring to. They have been here a longer time and have all the girlies dated up. We have Marine V-12s and Army V-12s here. So again, it's kind of a little bit of, like I said, animosity. There's a little bit of a rivalry between the two groups, but it doesn't really break out into, as far as Eugene says, like it's more of a friendly kind of a thing. Although there's probably some undercurrents of frustration there, but that's something that you see in a lot of his letters from Purdue University. In the winter of 1943-1944, Eugene is on the verge of leaving Purdue. But before he does, he sends his mother a letter home explaining what comes next in the process. You ask what I do when I leave here. Well, I'm not so sure. I know I will go to sea or further school. I do not relish the thought of more school, though. I stray, get anything from 48 hours to 19 days delayed orders. Don't get your hopes up, meaning don't get your hopes up that I'm going to be coming home during that time period. It is hard to count on anything. Things change so fast. I don't know what type of ship I will ask for. We have 13 choices, and we have to fill in all 13 of them. I think I will ask for some small craft, such as a destroyer. This part is interesting because, again, the Navy is kind of telling Eugene, yeah, sure, you could serve on whatever ship you want to, or you volunteer, you have your first choice. But in the end, we have ultimate say over where you're going to be going to. So Eugene goes on in this letter to describe how he was asked to write a paragraph for the benefit of the scribe, was the school newspaper, the scribe was the school newspaper and or yearbook of the Washingtonville High School at this time, and he actually complains that they send me the scribe, and many other servicemen no doubt receive it. It's just as lousy as ever. I told him to tell them that if they continue to send in the paper, they better put something of interest in it for us, or why bother? It took me a whole day off to write this letter. I had better close now. After leaving Purdue, Eugene is sent to Norfolk Naval Base. And again, one of the major stopping points for many servicemen in the Navy. And one of his first letters home, he writes, "Dear Mom, I arrived in Norfolk at 9:30 a.m. When I got to the receiving station and tried to look for my gear, I found it had been misplaced in shipping. I will have to make out a complaint tomorrow, and they will send out a dispatch and trace it down. If they can't find it, they will have to give me a new issue, meaning clothing and equipment. In a way, I hope they can't find it." So imagine the frustration of being a young serviceman in the Navy, and you get to your port and your equipment goes missing, and there's no way for you to really do your job or to wear the clothing that was that you're used to wearing throughout your military service. And this is a complaint that Eugene carries with him for most of his time in Norfolk. He doesn't really get his gear for another couple of weeks or so. And what he says really at the end is that he hopes that they can't find it, probably meaning that, well, hey, if I don't have all my gear, I don't really have to be obligated to do a whole lot, and or maybe the equipment was just shoddy or uncomfortable to wear, and it kind of gave him an excuse to not have to wear the service clothing that he was issued. He says later on, we were just settled in our barracks. The base is about 3 miles from town. I got on the Cavalier to Cape Charles and took the Norfolk ferry over. Passed all sorts of naval craft in the river. I didn't see the Shangri-La, but it is here somewhere. It's another vessel that somebody that from Washingtonville probably was serving on. A funny thing happened on the way down. I did not see any of the boys from Purdue on the train or at the station, but I came across almost all of them on the ferry. A few of them are in my barracks, and the rest are shipping right out. My old roommate has a lower bunk next to mine. Some fun seeing all of my old friends again. I know nothing of my ship or when I will go aboard her. So again, this is Eugene is kind of describing that he went through training with these guys, and they're all serving together, kind of in the same cohort, at least until they get divided up amongst whatever vessel they're serving on. And again, here's the quote regarding his gear, along with the lettering. You notice that the letterhead has changed slightly, so we have went from kind of like the basic blue U.S. Naval Training Station Sampson letterhead to the lined paper from Purdue, and now we have a different letterhead with the eagle and crossed anchors of the U.S. Navy on it on this one. So this denotes it's kind of a fun way of kind of dating some of his letters when there isn't really a date attached to them. One of the letters from Norfolk that actually is dated is actually a very important letter in the story that we're telling. This letter comes from March 21st, 1944, in that Eugene kind of describes what the process is after Norfolk. And in it, he says that there is a draft of about 500 men leaving here. They are all lashing their gear and getting set in general. They will eventually land up in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I wouldn't mind that draft myself. They will be there for 18 months, and then they will come back for a 30-day leave. My destroyer is at Portland, Maine. I heard this from a sailor I met in town who had just come in on a can. The last 2 days have been the wettest and the stormiest days I have seen in a long time. The wind blew a gale, and the rain came down in torrents for 2 days straight. I took one liberty during the rain. It was some fun. Today is cold but clear. So the Eugene mentions can. Can is kind of a naval slang for a destroyer, and somebody who served on a destroyer was known as a tin can sailor. So that is what Eugene is describing here. And this is the vessel that Eugene was assigned to. It's the U.S.S. Emmons. It was a destroyer DD-457. The other designation is DMS. It's Destroyer Minesweeper 22. That notes that it was converted during the latter half of its career, but it's still listed as DD-457. And this is a photo of it as Eugene would have seen it in Norfolk in 1943. It was commissioned just 2 days before the attack on Pearl Harbor, and it saw active service patrolling the Atlantic and the Mediterranean theaters before being transferred to the Pacific. At this time, the Emmons was just sailing south from Portland, Maine, where it was on exercise duty, and we're going to start to kind of intermingle the Emmons with Eugene, and we'll be able to kind of see where Eugene was on the Emmons based upon what letters he's sending. And just some additional information on the Emmons. So it was laid down on November 14th, 1940, meaning that was when construction began on it, and it was launched on August 23rd, 1941. So you're looking at 4 months before Pearl Harbor, and then it was commissioned on December 5th, 1941, 2 days before Pearl Harbor. So again, the U.S. is getting prepared for something to happen. It's a Gleaves-class destroyer, and again, as I mentioned before, it became a destroyer minesweeper. You'll see that it's the circle on this chart. It's not the Emmons, but basically you kind of see what it looks, its size compared to other U.S. naval vessels during the time of World War II. And again, destroyers are kind of like light ships. They're fast. They were really used for escort duty. They also kind of were the ones that would go out and kind of patrol waters off major beaches. And you'll hear a little bit more about kind of like what it actually did in the Atlantic theater. And this is just kind of a snippet from the logbook of the Emmons, which is graciously provided by the U.S.S. Emmons Association. It's a survivors organization that does some really great work, and we're going to forward, providing their information at the end of this presentation as well. So in March 2nd, it's moored off of Casco Bay. This is kind of a map showing that. Casco Bay was kind of an area where a lot of these ships were being constructed at that time. March 17th, it goes to Rhode Island. Fast forward to April 9th, it's back in Casco Bay. And then April 19th, Eugene is received on board the Emmons. And then on April 20th, the day afterwards, it's underway as part of a destroyer, Division 19, with the U.S.S. Ellison, Hamilton, Macomb, Rodman, and a very important task force, as we'll find out. This is one of Eugene's first letters, or probably his first letter while on board the Emmons, and you'll see that it's not on U.S. Navy letterhead. It's actually kind of more of a telegram or photocopy. And he writes here, "Dear Mom, it has been a long time since you have heard from me, isn't it? It isn't that I don't want to write, I do, but I write as often as I can. We are having a life pretty darn easy right now. Electrical work isn't hard, and we work about when we feel like it. The chow is really good for a change. It seems to me like all I do is drink Joe, in parentheses coffee. We don't like all. We don't drink it by the cup, but by the bowl. Pretty good too. So again, he's drinking a lot of coffee. I am going to put in for my rate as soon as I can. I will have to wait 4 months before I can go up for it. I am feeling fine. In fact, I have never felt better. I am in high spirits and having a wonderful time. I know that I have told you very little, but you can see that the rubber stamp in the corner yourself, just like someone reading over your shoulder. I will write soon again." So again, Eugene is referring to the fact that this is V-mail, and the difference between V-mail and the letters that he was sending before is that this is actually being censored. So again, they're looking for, is he giving away the position of the ship? Is he giving away their destination? Is he giving descriptions of kind of the interior of the ship? Again, the threat of sabotage and espionage at this time was very real in the U.S., especially with what had happened at Pearl Harbor. It was a sneak attack, and many other espionage missions that took place throughout the war and off the coast of the United States as well. So Eugene is very aware of this, and so he's trying to tell his mother that he's okay without giving away too much. So May 1st to 3rd, the Emmons is currently off the coast of Algeria, according to the ship's log provided by the association. And in this letter kind of gives you a little bit, again, additional information into that censorship. So he says, "It is terribly hard to write a letter and not tell what goes on around me. All the letters go to the wardroom for inspection. Some are rejected. I have not had any rejected letters so far, and here's hoping this one won't be. When you add it all up, it is very little left to write about. So again, kind of saying I can't really say. I'm trying to say enough, but not too much. Eugene also writes to his father during this time. This is one of the few letters that we actually have from Eugene to his father, who he calls Dwight. And this is May 22nd. May 25th, 1944. So at this point, the Emmons is off the coast of Wales, and you can see too the letterhead has kind of as an illustration of what's supposed to be the Emmons on top as well. So again, this change from the V-mail, but still being censored. And he writes here that in this letter is interesting too, because he kind of goes into describe the routine on board ship. He says, as far as my shipboard activities go, I take the routine tests and checks on ground and fuses. I also take some of the repair work, such as phone switches and equipment in general. I stand either switchboard or searchlight watch. In port for recreation, we have movies at night on the fantail or in the mess hall. So again, kind of giving him some idea into what they were doing for fun on board, and kind of his daily work. And actually, another letter he talks about actually being mildly electrocuted by a current, but that was and he was hit in the eye, but it was something that he kind of brushed off. The letter also kind of describes some of Eugene's shipmates, which is pretty cool. So this on the second page, he says, for the fellows, they're a swell bunch of guys. In the electrical gang, we have everything from a Bronx buster to a traveling salesman. Our chief is a pretty swell guy. There isn't much about electricity that he doesn't know. It is quite an experience for me to see so many new and strange places. I wish I could tell you all about them, but that, of course, is impossible. Well, they are calling us to muster now. That means I will have to close. I hope I have answered some of your questions. I will try and do better when I have more time. Your salty son, Gene. So again, not even mentioning their names, but I'm sure, people who had family members who served on board ship or might have known Gene. These descriptions might resonate with many people. So the first major action that Eugene participates in while on board the Emmons is a little thing called D-Day. Takes basically the U.S. The Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied France on June 6, 1944. The Emmons was involved in basically clearing shore batteries near Port en Bessin in France with the U.S.S. Doyle in support. Again, pretty heroic action. It was written up in many papers. Eugene talks about this afterwards, and of course immortalized in this illustration by Dwight C. Shepler, who was on board the Emmons, and Eugene actually mentions this as well. So again, considering that only a couple months ago he was just being sworn in, and now he is 18 years old watching, or actually he's 19 years old, and he's participating in one of the defining moments in world history. And soon after this, he writes his mother a letter home. So on June 9th, 1944, 3 days after D-Day, Eugene writes his mother a letter stating, "This is the first time in quite a while that I have been able to write. The ship was sealed and no mail was allowed to leave. The news has been quite exciting, hasn't it? I got quite excited over it myself. We don't get the news much in detail. I don't imagine anyone is getting much on it, though. It has been a long time since I have received any mail. We expect to get some tonight. I certainly hope so. It will be swell to hear from you all again. I am anxious to hear from Betty too. So in this letter, Eugene is stating that he's unable to really send out specific information about what happened, but he assumes that his family knows what happened through the news. Again, this was a major invasion. After all was said and done, it was broadcast through the papers, through mass media, and Eugene actually does reference a lot of letters and news clippings, news articles and clippings that are sent his way, and but again, he cannot describe what this thing is just yet because he's afraid of the mail being censored. But the fact that he alludes to this, kind of, you could tell he was very excited about it. And he also mentions in this letter a woman named Betty again. This was one of his love interests. Unfortunately, we don't know what her last name was at this time. But again, it's a good reminder of that this was a human being, that this was a person, and even though he witnessed this very important thing, he participated in it with all these other young men, that he was still an individual, and Betty was on his mind. Eugene's next letter home is kind of interesting because this is the letter where he's finally given enough time to kind of talk about what he did, but at the same time, his ship is doing the same exact thing, but on the other coast of France. So June 25th, 1944, the Emmons is off of Cherbourg, France, and so he writes in this letter, I just found out that I could say that I was in the French invasion. It was quite a show. I can't mention the names of any places, but we saw quite a lot of the coast and at close range. The shore batteries were no cinch. So again, the Emmons was involved with destroying these shore batteries that were shelling naval vessels and also the landing craft that were basically transporting the Allied soldiers onto the beach. So again, this is he's kind of describing from his perspective in a very optimistic way kind of what happened without kind of giving away too much away that's going to be censored, or also kind of giving his mother alarm. So that's this letter here, and he also writes that I just got a letter from Don the other day. I answered it immediately. He has a good reason to complain about being stuck where he is, but I'm glad that he didn't have to hit the beach in the invasion. He can be darn thankful that that he was where he was. So his brother is still stateside, and he's maligning that he wasn't involved in the invasion. But at the same time, Eugene is like, don't worry about it. He was probably better off that way, and I would have preferred him to be safe than on the beaches. And again, this is another letter from this is June 29th, so July 29th, 1944, and here Eugene again goes into the censorship, which is interesting. So he says the mail is censored on board, and then those are not accepted. Those that are not acceptable as doubtful are held on board. If you have said too much, you go to mast and are fined. If it is not so bad, you are just warned. I have been very careful, and I have had no mail returned. So there's kind of a modus operandi to Eugene kind of talking about girls and kind of the goofy things that he does. It's not just a way to kind of show off or brag or act tough or just youthfulness. It's also the fact that he could write about those things, and they're not going to they're not going to bring danger to him or his shipmates, as well as they're not going to be censored, and he wouldn't be fined or disciplined for giving away certain things. He also says that in this letter, I am enclosing the excerpt I wrote you about in this letter, meaning he had written in a previous letter an excerpt from I believe the Boston Globe that talks about the Emmons and its involvement on D-Day, because at that point, obviously everybody knows about D-Day at this point, so they're publishing articles about it. And he says it'd be a good idea to have a clipping bureau send your clippings on the Emmons. Do they have a clipping from the back issues? We have had lots of them sent to different fellows from all over the country. I would like to get a hold of as many as I can. The clipping bureau might be able to do this. What do you think? So, meaning he wants to put together a scrapbook of all these clippings that talk about the Emmons, because again, he's excited that he participated in this thing, and his shipmates are excited too. And this is just a map showing kind of where Eugene is at this time. So the Emmons at this point is involved in the invasion of Italy. So again, he goes from the Atlantic to southern France as part of Operation Dragoon in July of 1944, and then he goes, and then the ship is kind of floating around Palermo and Taranto, Italy, kind of, heavily involved in operations there as the Allies are landing troops there, and they're basically attempting to kind of like do a pincer move on Nazi-occupied France from the north, from the Atlantic and the south, from Italy and the Mediterranean. So we get to late August. The Emmons is off the coast of southern France, kind of doing the same thing it was doing in June on Normandy. A week, so it's involved in kind of again battering those shore batteries, softening up those targets so that the landing craft could offload the troops that were on them to be sent ashore. And he writes a letter to his mom about a week later, which kind of describes kind of how difficult it was to actually get mail on board ship. So he says, say Mom, if Betty is again his love interest at this time, sends you a gold identification bracelet, hold on to it, will you? She wanted to send it to me, but I told her it was better not to trust the overseas mail. It will be quicker for her to send it to you and have you give it to me when I see you next time. A package would take 3 or 4 months to reach me. Letters don't take that long. I just received your package of sweets about 2 weeks ago. They were all dried out and stale when I got them, but I managed to salvage one box by heating them with butter in the oven. So again, kind of showing how delayed things were and how it affected, like, perishable food items like, chocolate or candy being sent to him. One of Eugene's letters from September kind of also talks about kind of, again, goes into censorship, which is, again, it's a common complaint of him, but it also, he describes, again, his methodology to it, which is really great. So he writes in this letter from September 24th, 1944, I got a letter from Phil the other day. He said that he had a swell time with you and Dwight. He did mention having to answer 5 million questions. I hope this will spare me some of the questions I am due for. So Eugene's parents are very concerned. They really want to know what was going on, and is everybody okay, as parents do. I will have a lot to talk about when I see you, even though my letters are short. My answer to Phil was rejected because I mentioned the name of some ports we were at about 3 months ago. So you see, the censorship is still pretty tight. That is why I write so much about nothing and not so often. So you'll see too in this other letter here from October 7th, the actual censors actually cut out a section that discusses, the sentence kind of starts off with, it starts about, and then it's cut out over here. So they don't want anybody to know the location based upon the time, the local time. But he does mention in this letter from October 7th, which is pretty cool. As a baseball fan, he says, "Why don't you see what you can do to make those damn Cards, meaning the St. Louis Cardinals, win for me? I haven't laid any money on them, but there are a lot of bets down. I have about $250 on the books now. I expect to have more when I reach the States." So again, Eugene, we know actually from his mother as well, like they were both St. Louis Cardinals fans. So the fact that he's watching the World Series, or listening to the World Series while he's on board ship with his shipmates, and they're betting on it, in kind of a friendly way. Again, a really, a human snapshot into kind of the lives of these men on board ship. The Emmons eventually arrives back in port in U.S. waters on November 9th. It arrives into Boston for refitting. During this time, Eugene takes advantage of his leave. He goes. He actually travels from Boston to Washingtonville on 72-hour leave, and we have this postcard here that kind of just is a brief, thank you for having me. And he says, thanks for the swell time. On my 72 hours, the chances of me coming home again for the holidays is very slim. You can never tell, though. Thanks again for everything, especially the eats. Love, Gene. In a more long-form letter, Gene writes his mother that here I am back again after a wonderful time at home and visiting. Thanks, I had been thinking about my leave for so long, and then the time went so quickly. The old town won't be the same until the whole gang are back again, to make the older generation sit up and take notice. We will too. Eugene, and then he goes into describe. He says, I have done practically nothing since I got here, meaning in getting back to Boston. I stand around, freeze, sit around, freeze, sleep, freeze, go on liberty and freeze. It isn't really as bad as it sounds, but it's still pretty cold. I saw Edith Simmons, this is a relative of his, yesterday. Only stayed a short time because I was not expected, and Anne was away for the weekend. I am going over Monday for the night and evening meal, call it what you will. How was your Thanksgiving dinner? I bet it was quite a party. It would have been swell if I could have been there. We didn't do half bad though. Could have been better, but we had plenty to eat. I got a letter from Don today, meaning his brother. It was one he wrote in England. Very interesting. I will send it later. It is 6 pages long and the pages are large. Unfortunately, we don't have this letter in our collection at this time. Will you please send me my jumper and my pipe? I don't think I will need any money. I will try to hold out until payday. This letter itself is very poignant to me, because you think about what Eugene says, and that the town won't be the same until the whole gang are back together again. Unfortunately for Eugene and his parents and his family especially, this was the last time that they would see their son alive. At this time, the Emmons is recommissioned to DMS-22, so it's a destroyer minesweeper instead of a destroyer. The only difference is that, again, it's basically equipped with, it's basically equipped to kind of get rid of mines that would have been used that would have detonated if they were hit by ships or lightly tapped by ships. So it's going to be redeployed to the Pacific Theater at this time. So it has a new number. It's DMS-22, but it's still the Emmons, and Eugene Akers is still on board. And again, just examples of kind of the Emmons and then next to it a destroyer minesweeper vessel that was originally just a destroyer. The next letter that Eugene writes his mother is December 31st, 1944, and this is a cool letter because it actually talks about where the ship is going, before it gets sent to the Pacific, or how he's going to be getting there, because remember, he's in Boston right now. So think about how is this ship going to travel from the Atlantic to the Pacific, in time to be where it needs to be. So he writes to his mother, I guess it would be better if I told you now what the best dope, meaning, information on things is right now. It is only scuttlebutt, but comes pretty close. So he's hearing, it's kind of like hearsay. He doesn't really, it's not like exact information he's hearing it from other people, but it's pretty close to be accurate to tell. We are leaving here tomorrow, and our next stop is likely to be Panama. From there to the West Coast, and then to Pearl, meaning Pearl Harbor. We have used up our allotted time here on the East Coast, so there it is, the strongest dope information that I can find. We may be out as long as 2 years. I hope not, but that is the way things go. My next letters will have to be more guarded than this one, because they will go through the censor. So again, kind of, so again, kind of like describing kind of, this is how, so the ship's going to go through the Panama Canal, and then it's going to end up on the West Coast, and then from probably, San Diego, or whatever, it's going to go to Pearl Harbor, and then from there it's going to go to, the Philippines or Japan or wherever it needs to be. The next letter Eugene writes home is January 20th, 1945. This letter is a bit of a historical mystery for us, but it was really interesting to kind of put together the pieces once we figured out what was going on here. As I mentioned before, Eugene had, went on, dated around. He had a few girlfriends during his time in the service, but he has really one major girlfriend at the beginning, Betty, who we mentioned earlier, and this person is not necessarily his girlfriend yet. They met each other, but he's writing about her a lot. And this letter, he really kind of goes into kind of describing why does he like this person. The other interesting thing with this is that this person has an important role in how news of Eugene's death gets back to his parents, and we'll find out how later on. So this letter starts off with, "Dear Mom." Well, to start off with, here is Odette's address, Miss Odette Purchell, 52 Elliott Avenue, West Newton, Massachusetts. That takes care of that. I would have sworn that I had enclosed it in my other letter. What I did say was right and has been carried out. The letter goes on to describe who Odette was. I guess I will tell you more about Odette. As I said, she is French-Irish. She speaks French fluently. She also can, on occasion, use a sweet Irish brogue. Quite a combination. She has a swell singing voice. She is very pretty, about 5'5" tall, brown hair and eyes. Very nice figure, but a little galump, meaning clumsy. This is sudden, but I have to close now. And then the letter continues, because he's writing this letter as he's standing watch in the engine room. So he has to kind of take a break, but then he comes back to it later. And he continues to say, no, I won't go into any further description of Odette. That covers about everything, except personality, and that is pretty nice, too. As she said in her last letter, I like you very much as a person and a friend. That is right now. But as you said, who knows what may happen in the future. So again, you don't have to worry on that score just yet, but I am working on it. Meaning that Eugene is trying to court her. She's respectfully saying, no, thank you. Let's be friends for right now. But Eugene is very much taken by her. The really cool thing about this letter, too, is that the fact that we had her full name and address in this letter, we were able to actually locate her information on Ancestry using our library's edition of Ancestry.com. And so this is a photo of Odette from her 1944 high school yearbook, so around the time that Eugene would have met her. Now, you might be asking yourself, how did Eugene meet Odette? In a previous letter, or I think it was and another letter that Eugene had written, he mentions meeting her through a shipmate. She's a cousin of a shipmate of his. And again, through our library's access to Ancestry.com, along with the role of the Emmons crew, courtesy of the U.S.S. Emmons Association, we were able to determine that Odette Purchell's cousin was Stanley J. D'Entremont, and he was a fireman first class on the Emmons with Eugene at the time that they were in Boston. So they probably Stanley probably said to Eugene, "Hey, I have you should meet my cousin. She's really swell. Maybe you guys will get along very well." And that's how Eugene meets Odette, through Stanley. And Stanley and Eugene are currently serving on the Emmons in the Pacific Theater. So here we are in the Pacific. The Emmons is part of Task Group 52.2. As part of the Battle of Okinawa, one of the largest invasions put together during the war, we have 790,000 Allied troops, so that's including Americans and British and Australian Commonwealth troops. We also have around 116,000 Japanese forces, and the goal was to control the island of Okinawa for the use of Kadena Air Base. Again, this is part of kind of the island hopping campaign where we're slowly getting closer to invading Japan, and it was also nicknamed the Typhoon of Steel, just for the the sheer carnage that that ensued as a result of this battle. Again, it lasted from April to June. Again, you think of a battle in modern terms, or even in historical terms, when you think about the Battle of Trenton, or other major battles in U.S. history, it's usually like one day or over the course of maybe a couple of days. This is over the course of several months, and so the Emmons is very much involved in the initial phases of this conflict, of this battle. So it's around this time that Eugene pens what is the last letter he sends home, and it's undated, but we assume it's probably late March of 1945, and the letter previous to this one actually references the brand new stationery that he just got, and which is pretty interesting, because he, in his own way, he says, "What do you think of this new stationery? Pretty swell, huh?" So we're able to kind of determine, and that letter is dated early March. So based upon the lag of communications and the frequency of his letters, we're assuming this is probably a week or two after that. Maybe early April, but unfortunately we can't really guarantee that without having a kind of a stamp or even some notation of when this was written. The letter itself is pretty plain, but I feel like it's kind of important to kind of read this, read it in full, because again, these are the last words that Eugene's mother, Emily, and father Dwight ever got from their son. "Dear Mom, it has been a long time since I have written you, but there is a good reason for that. There are no mailboxes at sea, so I couldn't write. That was very interesting about Danny. He must have done a bang-up job. I am sorry he wasn't out here when I got here. I would have liked to have seen him. So Don, his brother, has been transferred to the 7th Army. I wonder how he likes serving with the frogs," meaning the French. It's a derogatory term for the French that was commonly used at this time. I bet he was glad to get away from them. I always liked them, but I imagine it would be pleasant working with an American outfit. See if you could find anything on the SSF, a Canadian-American outfit which worked in Italy and up through southern France. And these were troops that probably Eugene would have had contact with or was familiar with during the Emmons' time in the Mediterranean. They must have landed at the time I was there. I read an article which called them the best fighting unit there is. Please send me Don's address. I have written, but I am not sure that I have the correct address. I had a short letter, but a very encouraging one from Odette. She is entertaining the boys in hospitals and canteens in and around Boston. She really has a swell voice. From what she says, she must be doing a swell job. She said that she had received the quote-unquote darling picture of me and that she appreciates the trouble you went to get it for her. She also intends to write you. I want to thank you for doing it too. It was swell. She sent me a snapshot of her with the snowbank as the background. Boy, would it be swell to see some snow again. She also adds quite a bit to the view. Just as beautiful as ever. Well, Mom, take care of yourself, and I will write as soon as I can. All my love, Jean. So here we are on April 6, 1945. On that day, the Emmons and the U.S.S. Rodman, DD 456, and destroyer Minesweeper 21, again another destroyer that was converted, were sweeping the island we're sweeping kind of the waters around Okinawa for mines in preparation for the landing of U.S. forces. Unfortunately, Eugene's ship, this was during the time in which we start to see kind of instances of mass kamikaze attacks. There were 2 attempts to hit Eugene's ship, the Emmons. They were both shot down by the Emmons crew. Unfortunately, the Emmons would suffer 5 simultaneous hits after that, despite putting up a valiant defense and aiding the Rodman that was also being attacked. The ship sustained heavy damage. And of the ship's 254 crew members, 50 were killed and 65 were wounded in this specific action. So, you know, a little bit, almost nearly half of the crew were killed and wounded. The ship was so badly damaged that it was intentionally sunk the following day by the U.S.S. Ellison. Eugene was badly injured, and he was transferred to a nearby vessel and eventually succumbed to his wounds and passed away as a result of them. This is a photo from the U.S.S. Missouri, taken on April 11th, 1945. They were about to receive a Japanese Zero attack. Again, you can imagine, being on board a U.S. naval vessel during this and watching these manned, suicide attempps hitting your vessel would be, very traumatic for a lot of these guys. But they put up, they were very brave and put up a valiant defense of their vessels. Fortunately, according to the U.S. Navy, nobody in this photo was hit by this plane, fortunately. But you could just imagine the chaos that would have ensued and the determination and focus these guys had to have in order to not just defend themselves, but to defend, each other's vessels from these basically flying bombs. And as I mentioned earlier, on April 7th, 1945, the Emmons is intentionally scuttled by the U.S.S. Ellison, the other destroyer minesweeper that was in its crew, that was in its group. The Emmons wreck is still there. You could dive it. It's a pretty deep wreck, but there's been some films and documentaries about the wreck, and it's now a war memorial to those who gave the ultimate sacrifice during the Battle of Okinawa. About a month after the sinking of the Emmons, news finally reaches Eugene's parents that their son unfortunately has died. One letter that kind of talks about the confusion that ensued following the sinking of the Emmons and kind of news getting back home, whether Eugene was alive but severely wounded or killed in action, is described in a letter that Eugene's father, Dwight, writes to Augustus W. Bennett, who was U.S. representative for New York State. on May 14th, 1945. This letter is interesting because it also talks about how news got back to them. And this is, remember how I mentioned earlier about Stanley and Odette. This kind of goes into a little bit of description of that. So in this letter, he says, "You will recall that Emily showed you a letter from Boston saying that one of Eugene's shipmates, Stanley, had written that Eugene had been wounded. He had not been so reported in the casualty list, and it seemed strange that a letter could have crossed the Pacific in less time than was required for the Bureau of Navy personnel, with its instant means of communication to correct its information. Last week, several days before we received the official notice, the shipmate above mentioned, himself a survivor of the sinking of Eugene's ship, telephoned from San Francisco to his relative in Boston, Odette, and told her that Eugene had died. It seems incredible to us that a survivor could cross the ocean with such news before the Bureau officially responsible for transmitting it to the next of kin had notified us. Promptness in the dispatch of casualty information we had supposed was the rule, a rule intended to prevent the distress that would be occasioned by the receipt of such news through haphazard and perhaps not trustworthy sources. Even a telegram announcing Eugene's death bears on the face of it evidence of the slow motion with which the Bureau performs its duties. It was dated May 5th. It was received by us by the Western Union on May 12th. Western Union informs us that it was filed in Washington at 8:38 p.m. on May 11th. The functioning of the Bureau in this instance has been bad beyond words. We would like to believe that it is an isolated instance, but when error is piled upon error and delays are prolonged beyond the possibility of any excuse for them, we are afraid there is something basically wrong in the procedures or organization of the Bureau. We can only hope that other parents of sons in service may be spared the distress of mind through which we have passed during these 3 weeks since we heard the news of the sinking of the Emmons." So again, Eugene's parents hear of the sinking of the Emmons, but no word of their son. And as easy as it might be to, admonish the Bureau for its slow progress and kind of the ambiguity of the news being passed along to them, remember, this is a time of war. Things are being heavily censored. And especially during this crucial point of the war, where we're on the verge of invading Japan, because at this time we're not aware of the atomic bomb being dropped yet, which happens in August. The other thing with this letter too, which we need to kind of understand to put some in context, is that this person lost their son, and I personally have not, I'm fortunate enough not to have lived with that experience, but I'm sure parents who have unfortunately had to deal with that loss, that very sudden loss, probably would feel the same way. It's confusion, it's anger, and the fact that Eugene's father kind of expresses that in this letter is understandable. They want clear answers, and they would have preferred them sooner rather than later. However, news does reach our community around that time, and these are just several obituary clippings mentioning Eugene Akers. This one is from the Goshen Independent Republican, dated May 18, 1945. Again, these were all saved by Eugene's parents, so that's how we were able to kind of date them and find them. Here's another obituary from an unknown paper, but again, kind of briefly describing Eugene's service, and as it relates to from him enlisting as an electrician's mate, 3rd class, and where he went to school, and how and what he did for his military service. So one final letter I'm going to be reading excerpts from is dated May 1st, 1945. So this is 2 weeks before that other letter to Augustus Bennett. And this is written from Dwight Akers, Eugene's father, to Donald Akers, Eugene's brother, who was currently serving with the U.S. Army in Europe, as mentioned in Eugene's letter, final letter home to his mother. And in this letter, it goes into kind of, again, how did they find out about his death, but also kind of how the community and their family members came together. And it's a very poignant letter, because I'm sure we could all relate to when we lose somebody suddenly, without warning. How do we grieve? And especially if you're a member of a military family, or a family that has somebody who's a first responder, something that we all kind of universally can relate to as well. So the letter starts off with, "Dear Donald, I wish we could keep this news to ourselves until you are home again and could hear it in the midst of your friends and family. But it cannot be kept. The war, I am sure, has taught you that we must take the bad news with the good, and take it when it comes. On April 21st, we heard on the radio and read in the papers that Eugene's ship had been sunk on the operations around Okinawa. There is no need to relate the means we employed during the days that followed to get some word about Gene. The result of our inquiries is all that matters. We now know Eugene was transferred from his own ship to another, and there died of wounds. And so far, that is all we know. We got news that Gene was lost last Thursday, but there had been contradictions and uncertainties in the reports, so we didn't write you until all possible doubts had been removed. That is until now. Leslie and Catherine, so Dwight's other son, who is the farmer, and his wife, have spent what time they could with us. And little Annabelle, so their daughter, or Dwight's granddaughter at this point, with her sweet ways and happy disposition, has been the best tonic to our spirits that your mother and I could have had. Nat Marvel has been with us much of the time since Thursday, and Gordon came down from Boston over Sunday. A member of the Tuttle family arrived Thursday evening, and Twitch on Friday. On Friday night, we had a glad surprise when Dwight Akers Jr. phoned on from New York that he was in port and could come to see us. The Twitchells and Dwight left yesterday, but last night Polly arrived from Bridgeport, and Carl and I are planning to come over the weekend next Saturday. So you see, we have not had to take this news without the help and cheering presence of good friends. Your own near friends in the Army, I am sure, will help you in their own way to meet the shock of this news. Meet the shock this news will give you, and will be fortified by a better knowledge than any of us at home could of the sufferings and sacrifices entailed by this war. To us, this loss will be intensely personal, but you will have learned from what you have seen that the brutalities of war have produced many worse tragedies than this one. Prolonged tragedies are harder to bear by those who suffered them, and harder who knew and loved the victim of them. After the sinking of Eugene's ship, the hours or days of his life could not have been many. His death was a clean and quick one. We have a right to hope that in the shock of his injury, he did not suffer or know that he was at the end of his journey. To the rest of us, forgetfulness and sleep are not always to be had for the asking of or the trying. Whatsoever the circumstances of Gene's fate may have been, we can rest assured that he has now forgotten them. So the letter also includes, I also mentioned Leslie, who was the farmer who stayed at home, and this letter also kind of goes into what was going through Leslie's mind as well. And when we think about survivor's guilt, it's described in this letter as well. So he says, so the letter goes on and says, Leslie's mind, I'm afraid, is troubled by a thought that I wish he would banish. The thought that by staying at home, he has not faced what you boys have faced or carried. His part of the load he said this to me on the night after after the arrival of the news about Eugene. I reminded him that both of you had written that he was using his abilities in the place they served best, and that neither of you had any thought that he was doing less than he should. If I had thought of it at the time, I would have said to him that he had thought that the rear echelons run all the way back from the fighting front to the factories and farms, and that without them, the combat units could neither move nor fight. I hope he will get the thought that is troubling out of his mind. So again, Eugene and Donald's brother Leslie stays home to be a farmer, and really without Leslie, there would be no food. And with a lot of the thousands of other individuals, millions of other individuals who are working in the factories and the farming fields here in the United States, we wouldn't really be able to supply our fighting troops overseas with the food and equipment that they needed. So that's the truth, and that's kind of what Dwight is getting back to his son. Again, the letter also goes on to describe how Eugene's mother was coping with his loss. It's a very poignant letter that we're hoping to kind of put up online in full eventually. This slide shows a memorial plaque to Eugene that was commissioned, that's in our collection, and the grave of Eugene Akers, courtesy of Find a Grave. He's buried in National Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu, Hawaii, and that's a photo from findagrave.com. And we're not sure. We haven't done a lot of research into whether Eugene's parents went to visit him, but I would imagine that they did at some point. We know that Emily Akers herself was very well traveled, and so was Dwight. They traveled all over. They had friends in the Pacific. They also had friends in Europe that they would visit. So I would imagine that they would have visited their son at some point. And before we close out, I just want to thank a couple of organizations and highlight them. The U.S.S. Emmons Association is an amazing group of individuals who are now just the sons and daughters and relatives of survivors on the Emmons. It used to be a survivors organization for veterans of the Emmons, and unfortunately they lost their last veteran not too long ago. But this organization is dedicated to preserving the memory of the Emmons and the crew that served on them, whether it was somebody who served on the Emmons before Okinawa or during the attack and survived the sinking of the ship on April 6, 1945. They have some amazing resources on their website, including Ship's Log, which was a big help to me in this research, as well as as well as the role of those who served on the Emmons. And again, we wouldn't really know who Stanley Intremont was without that. They also have a very active YouTube channel. Highly recommend it, especially for their oral histories that they've recorded with survivors at the time that they were still alive, and really gives a glimpse into what life was like on board the ship for people who would have served with Eugene at some point. Another great website is USNTS Sampson. This is a website dedicated to the U.S. Naval Training Station, Sampson, where Eugene would have been initially trained and went through boot camp. And you could still visit the park today. The museum is still there, and they have a monument dedicated to the sailors who would have gone through the training program there. This website's really great. They actually have some wonderful photographs and crowdsourced information from people who actually went through the training program there, and kind of gives you a better idea of what it was like for people who were part of this program. And as I mentioned before, Sampson State Park and Military Museum is located in Romulus, New York. You could visit it. Again, unfortunately, not many of the buildings are still standing, but you could visit the brig, and the brig is the museum. But definitely call ahead before doing that. And finally, if you have any questions at all or wish to share information about the Emmons or Eugene Akers or his family at all, we welcome you to contact us. Email is usually best for these things, but I don't mind fielding phone calls as well. Our email is moffat@rcls.org, and any information that you send to us through there will filter back to our local history department, and i.e. myself. Our website is moffatlibrary.org, and there we have links to our local history LibGuide as well as our blog. The LibGuide is a resource guide that provides you with information on our local history collections, including what do we have in terms of materials connecting not just items related to Eugene Akers and World War II, but also all the many other individuals and organizations and events that kind of helped shape and define our town. Our library is dedicated to being the vessel and the hub of all of this historical information, and we welcome you, and we invite you to not just explore and learn more about Eugene's life, but also the lives of the many other people that we have featured in our collections that made our community what it is. And our library also has a YouTube channel. Link is below. You could check out our other resources or archive local history presentations there. Where we can, we upload them on a fairly regular basis. And again, I wish to just thank again the U.S.S. Emmons Association, as well as USNTS Sampson, as well as you yourselves for taking the time out of your day and listening and watching this presentation. Again, although we weren't able to kind of go into everything in detail, I hope at least a little bit of this could shed some light into the life of one individual who made his mark on history and certainly has impacted my perceptions of the past. And we look forward to sharing more of his letters with you in the future. Thanks for watching.